Hey practice owners, it's Ricky Shockley, owner of MedSpa Magic Marketing, host of the MedSpa Success Strategies podcast, where practice owners come to discover strategies and tactics to better help them market and manage their practices so they can grow, improve profits, and have more financial freedom. I'm excited today to be joined by Dr. Brandon Kirsch. Dr. Kirsch, his work spans the world of dermatology, technology, business, and law. He's a board-certified dermatologist who actually started his career as a lawyer. We get into a little bit of that in the podcast episode. He serves as the chief of dermatology for Naples Community Hospital, and he previously worked as an assistant clinical professor of dermatology at the University of Colorado. Dr. Kirsch is a frequent contributor to the Huffington Post, Journal of American Medical Association, Journal of American Academy of Dermatology, and more. And I'm really excited to share this episode with you. We talk about a lot of things. We talk about the origins of kind of going from zero to an established business, how to achieve excellence in patient care. Dr. Kirsch has this great tip about how to treat your clients like a celebrity and always have that same mentality when you're interacting with your clients. We also talk about profit first planning and the financial lessons Dr. Kirsch learned, the difference between when he first opened his practice and how he thinks about adding additional services and profitability of his marketing efforts and investments now. So stay tuned. I'm confident you're going to get a bunch of great nuggets, as always, from this episode with my guest, Dr. Brandon Kirsch. Dr. Kirsch, thanks so much for joining us on MedSpa Success Strategies. We're excited to have you.
Yeah, it's a big honor to be here. I listen to the podcast on a regular basis, and I'm excited to have my own now. That's really cool.
Yeah. And so this conversation came to be, we were talking about patient experience, and I just find this common thread coming up over and over again in discussions with practice owners, which is, they think that marketing is going to solve all their problems, and they've got inherent problems in their business, the way that their business is managed, problems with patient satisfaction, team retention. And I wanted to focus more of our attention in the next few months on podcast episodes, focusing on making sure that you're running a good business. You're serving your patients at a high level. Because like I said, marketing is not going to solve those problems if you have those intrinsic issues. And we talked, and you've got incredible reviews as a practitioner and with your practice, been very successful in the years that you've been in business. So I was excited about this conversation to see if we could pick your brain a little bit. So can you start just by going through the origins of Kirsch Dermatology, or your backstory a little bit? I'm familiar, but I know our listeners won't be. So just your backstory and how you got into the space.
Well, I don't want to bore people, but basically, I'm from Canada. I started off as a lawyer. I really became a lawyer because I wanted to be a professional, sort of at the instruction of my parents who value education, but I didn't feel like I had what it took or wasn't willing to put the effort in to be a doctor, even though I always saw that as kind of the real brass ring. And I was a lawyer for a few years, and then I realized that I liked it, but I didn't love it. And I was young enough and ambitious enough to say, what can I do? How can I change things to find something that I'm really passionate about? And what I didn't like about the law in general was it was kind of too detached. I'm a people person, and at my core, I really want to help and engage with people. And that's what made medicine very attractive to me. So I changed course. I had no science background. I went to the University of Pennsylvania, did my pre-med, went to Brown for med school, did part of my internship at the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, or did my internship there, part of my derm residency, then transferred to the University of North Carolina, where I finished up. I was involved in drug development. I always had kind of a variety of interests, which is part of what drew me to dermatology to begin with, because you do so many different things in that field, from procedural to general to cosmetic. And eventually, my path led me to opening my own practice. I have an entrepreneurial spirit. I moved to Naples, Florida, solely because I thought it was the best fit for my young family, my wife and young daughter. And I always wanted to live in Florida. I loved the weather, despite being a dermatologist. Sometimes people refer to me as a tan dermatologist, which is not necessarily a compliment, and I do my best, but I do have an affinity for the sunshine of being outside. So we moved to Naples. I didn't know one person. I opened up my office January 2020, right before COVID. It was a very saturated market too, but basically I just let my dreams kind of dictate what my actions were. Whatever I I had big dreams, and that was to live in Naples, a beautiful place, an expensive place, a competitive place, and have my own dermatology practice and be successful at it. And that's how I ended up starting Kirsch Derm.
Yeah, that's a cool backstory. I was reading your backstory a couple of weeks ago about being a lawyer. I didn't know that prior to reading that.
And I'll say one more thing that is relevant to this discussion. Part of what drove me to become a doctor is I'm from Canada, and they got a lot of great doctors, but because it is socialized, the level of service is not at the same as you might expect in the United States, right? Yep. And that's kind of like that's just generally true. It's like in a free market capitalist system, we have a lot of options. People are going to be more demanding. When they don't have as many options, they'll be more satisfied with, what's available to them. The experience that I personally had and my family had was good, but I didn't feel like the care and attention was at the level that I really expected from a healthcare practitioner. And I wanted to correct that. I really wanted to bring a very high level of service to the delivery of medical care. And that's what really motivated me to open my own practice, because it's hard to do that when you have someone else telling you what to do as well. So that was really, honestly, the goal. And right out of the gate, we set sort of the principles of Kirsch Dermatology, our promises to our patient, and services at the forefront of that.
Ooh, I love that. So like you came into it with the North Star being, I'm going to be provide the best quality patient care I can, and everything else will fall in line. And I think so many other people are thinking about business and finance and marketing. And without that really being your North Star, I think you're going to fall short with everything else. So I think that's really important. And you said you outlined that before you even started. What were some of those things? What did that look like? Just if you don't mind sharing generally.
I mean, that we would always put the patient first. I mean, that came to me from the Mayo Clinic too. It's something that really resonated. Part of the reason I wanted to train there. I mean, that's the one thing that encapsulates their entire philosophy, to always put the patient first, to always focus on research and being the best provider that you can be. Those were really the core principles, honestly, above all else.
Yeah. I love those two. So being the best you can possibly be, and then putting patient care first. So in terms of practicality, when you say putting patient care first, how does that come to fruition in the everyday interactions you have with clients?
I always think about things through the lens of what is going to be best for this individual, not best for myself, not best for my staff. I treat everybody who comes in literally like a family member. On their worst days, people can be very challenging. And I think to myself, what if my mom or myself or my wife or my kids can have days like that? And how do I want their interactions to go with, a third-party healthcare professional is taking care of them? So no matter what, I always try and put myself in the shoes of the patient. And I just generally, my philosophy, honestly, has always been just kind of kill them with kindness. Sometimes you feel like when you're in this business, someone's literally like sticking you up. Even people can be very unreasonable. Maybe they're not everyone's super nice or well-intentioned, right? Like you can feel like you're honestly getting mugged. Like someone's got a gun and they're going to extort you about their review. It's always kind of like a subtext or whatever. And what do you do when if someone literally was coming up to you with a gun on the street and asking you for the wallet? You wouldn't be confrontational with them. Absolutely sweet. I would. I don't know. Some people would do things differently, but for me, I would be like, how can I help you? What can I do to make this right? And that's been my approach. But also, the amount of times that's diffused something and turned someone into an even more loyal client than they otherwise would have been is astounding. So it really pays a lot of dividends. The cost to that is negative because it pays off in the long run.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So on our previous episode, the episode that's published right before this, in our interview, we actually talked about this idea that like what you just said is true. Is like, every person in a sense, they've got this ability to like trash you online and to hurt the reputation of your business in the eyes of every customer that's investigating you or checking your reviews. And so kind of always having that in your mind of like, hey, even just selfishly for the sake of my business, my team, my staff, like I need to go out of my way to treat this person well and to try to figure out why they're upset and to come to a resolution. Because there's no point in being stubborn and trying to figure out who's right and who's wrong. Because ultimately, if that leads to bad online reviews, you're hurting your reputation and your ability to generate additional business.
Yeah, so I think these reviews are priceless. Having good reviews are literally priceless to me. That's, I had a business, like a VRBO vacation rental business. And it was the same principles that I use there as I use in my office today, which is like every one of those reviews is completely priceless to me. I don't want to have any negative reviews. If I get a negative review, I honestly try not to take it personally at all. I feel it personally, but I try not to. And I'll reach out to that person, do whatever I can to try and get them to take it down and reverse it. That's been why I have mostly 5-star reviews. There have been cases where I can't track these people down. I don't know what happened, and that's going to happen for sure. But overall, I've been successful at reversing the negative reviews that I have gotten. I think that is a key differentiator. I want to say one other thing just because you brought it.
Yeah.
Yes, I had this North Star, which was service. Everything I did from the beginning was service. It was all about what was the patient experience going to be? How was I going to lay out my office? What was my staff going to be? I never thought about the numbers at all. And that one, in a lot of ways, was a big mistake. Like, you got to do both. Okay. But that
Hmm.
was what I did to start out with. And I learned my lessons going about it, but certainly I did neglect that part. So I can understand why people do the opposite, right?
Yeah.
That's how you learn. But
Yeah.
the most important thing any person really has ultimately is their reputation. And I'll tell you one other thing. When I came up with the name of my practice, I was going, oh, there's a million different names. Most people use like a generic name, Sunshine Dermatology, Waters Edge, whatever. I'm just saying that's just what people do. And there's a good reason to do that because when it's your name, there's can be a lot of downside, honestly. And it can affect your personal reputation as well as your professional one. But I put my name on the line. I said, I'm going to call this place Kirsch, and everyone's going to know that this is Kirsch. And when they come there, they're going to expect the service that I want. That they're going to expect Kirsch level service, and that's going to happen regardless of what happens in the future. So people know I'm putting my name on the line, and they should therefore be willing to trust me. I'm not hiding behind another name. I'm not
Yeah.
saying you have to do that. I'm just saying that was my thought process.
Yeah, I like that. When we started our corporate name is still Shockley Marketing LLC. So I have clients that for 10 years they know us as Shockley Marketing. And so I think this, in our case, it was just a lack of ideas when we were opening the business.
And one thing, yeah,
But yeah.
and one thing that I'm really on top of with my office, I tell everybody who I hire, everyone that works, I say, listen, this place is called Kirsch Dermatology. People expect to have the Kirsch Dermatology experience. Basically, everyone here that they talk to is Kirsch. You answer the phone, you're Dr. Brandon Kirsch. That's who you are to that patient. You're Dr. Brandon Kirsch. You walk the patient back to him. That's Dr. Brandon Kirsch that's doing it. Anybody who touches, comes into contact, emails, communicates from that patient's perspective. You're Dr. Kirsch. So you have to look at it like this is your office. You
Yeah.
represent me as me. And so that's
I
what I
think
really
that's
try to
that's a
emphasize
really
because people don't say, "Oh, it was just Bianca." Like I said Bianca, but I love you, Bianca. If you're listening, she actually is a wonderful front desk person. But they don't. If she didn't do a good job, that's just one of the people that works for me. They wouldn't say, "Oh, Bianca's terrible." They say Kirsch is terrible. So that's the bottom line.
that is 100% true, and that's a really good way to make that easy to stick. But I think that principle is true for anybody listening to this podcast. If your med spa is, San Francisco Med Spa or whatever it is, that same principle should apply. That you should have that same level of pride in your business because every single person that interacts with a patient is a reflection of that business entity. And so, like, I think you need to apply that same principle whether your name's on the business or not. But I love that because that obviously makes it really easy for it
Yeah,
to
and then
stick and to
I
explain.
teach them the
Yeah,
culture, and then if they handle something, I said, "Do you think that's how Dr. Kirsch would handle that?"
yeah,
Because you are Dr. Kirsch in this situation, so you need to ask
yeah.
yourself, "What would Dr. Kirsch say?"
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like that a lot. And I think going back to the thing with reviews and reputation, you said your reputation is everything. That's true as a person. That's also true as a business. And so when you're talking about marketing, you can run ads on Facebook, ads on Instagram, send newsletters, send text, and there's a ton of value, obviously, to those things. But above all, the most important thing you can possibly do when it comes to marketing your business is control your reputation online. And that's something you don't need to pay someone to do. It's not super complicated, but being on top of it, making sure that you have excellent and patience and client care, having that as the North Star, I think will take care of a lot of the stuff
That's
that
just
falls
a
from there.
proxy, actually, if you think about it, because a small percentage of people will give you a
Absolutely.
review, but the truth is, your reputation is how people talk about you around the kitchen counter, how people talk about you at the nail salon, when your name comes up on Facebook. That's what your reputation is. Like literally every single touch point, you're only seeing one little small window. So you got to make sure that whenever your name comes up is like a real positive association. That's my philosophy.
Yeah, true. And it's all relative, right? Like if you're a practice owner, you're like, well, 9 out of 10 patients are happy. But if your competitors all have 96 out of 100 patients that are happy, then you're at a competitive disadvantage. So like your goal should be like it's not going to be perfect, but it should be to get as close to that 100% satisfaction number as possible, and not just accept that you're going to have 10 or 15% of your patients that leave and aren't happy for whatever reason. Like that's a problem you need to figure out because when people are researching your practice online, if they're seeing your business and just using Google as the proxy data point, like you said, if you got a 4.6 star rating on Google and your competitor down the street has 4.9 or 5 stars, all other things equal, you're not getting that phone call and you're not getting that appointment.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to tell you some other secret here that, I'm giving away all my secrets. But at the end of the day, actually, this is true to my principle, which is I want everybody to have the best possible experience and service, whether it's at Kirsch or anywhere else. So if I can teach somebody, people have taught me, then it's really important that I pay that forward as well. Here's something that you don't consider about your reputation. When you have a great online reputation, staff come to you too. people write me and they say, I want to work for Kirsch. They look at my website, they read about me, they see all the great reviews. I don't even have to recruit for a lot of the people that come to me, for the positions that I have, because people see this reputation and they say, that's where I want to work. So it's a major advantage. Like if you have to go out and recruit people and pay a recruiter versus people see how great you're doing and want to work there, I mean, that's money in the bank too.
Absolutely. And that's actually a perfect transition. I'm going to jump to my question it's going to be in a few, but I'm going to jump to it now because that's a perfect transition. So we talked on our last episode about this idea that patient satisfaction is very much tied to employee satisfaction.
Yeah.
And make sure that you have a team that's happy, has a smile on their face, and is excited to be at work and to be working for you. What are your thoughts on that? Like and I see this when I talk to practice owners is usually when I talk to somebody and they're complaining about their staff, they have a ton of turnover. That's going to be reflected almost all the time in patient experience. You don't see someone who's complaining about those things have great reviews online. So can you talk about the connection between, a staff that's excited to be there and is happy with their work environment and patient satisfaction?
You're not going to succeed in taking care of your patients and getting good reviews if your staff is unhappy. I learned this, the Four Seasons was founded in Toronto, which is where I'm from. And every time you go and you walk in the Four Seasons, I don't stay there or whatever, but sometimes I've stayed there, don't get me wrong, but it's not like I'm a regular. But they're all so happy and nice. And one thing I learned is they've got this like amazing incentive program for the people that work there. They can all stay at the hotel. They get treated super well. And then it just so happened that I have a patient who was very high up at the Ritz-Carlton here in Naples too. And basically he said that the way they focus, and they've gotten all kinds of national service awards. I forget what it's called. It's called like the Malcolm something. It's like national service awards. I mean, everyone knows the Ritz, so regardless, people understand that that's one of the highest levels of service in any industry is the Ritz-Carlton in the hotel industry. And he said it's actually employees first, then customers, then finance. That's how it's ordered. And he recommended to me a book called Greater Than Yourself, which is like a business book. It's kind of a fictionalized account of how you build up and take care of your employees and how that pays ongoing dividends. And one of the things that I always try and do at Kirsch Dermatology is I try and identify, like, people come to you, maybe they're at the front desk, maybe they're an MA, whatever their job is, an injector. They're going to come, that's their starting point. Where do they want to be? What do they want to do? What excites them? And I want to create a path to get them to where they're going to be ultimately the most satisfied. And maybe ultimately they want to go to med school and that's not going to be with me. But I'm going to help them self-actualize and be the best that they can be and support them. And then as a result, they'll be happier, they'll be more productive. And it's really important to have your incentives aligned. I'm constantly like noodling around with this, and it's not an easy thing. But like, if people aren't incentivized to sell or to be positive and to be happy, it's not enough to just give them a really good salary. They have to be like proactively incentivized, like a performance-based incentive. Then the shine comes off. You lose the luster. It doesn't matter. It happens to everybody. I'm guilty. You have to have that constant kind of encouragement. Either you're working toward this goal that's very attainable, or you're getting rewarded, and you see if you do these things on a continual basis, then you're going to be successful financially or whatever. So first is, recognizing what's important to your people, supporting them, giving them a positive work environment, weeding out any negativity like right away. Like, I don't tolerate negativity at all. There's no room for a rotten apple. That spoils the bunch. I mean, that's a fact. Okay, it's a cliche, but it's true. So, and then I always reflect, like, what can I do better? But some people are negative. We don't have any I don't tolerate that at all. Everyone's positive, Kirsten, everyone's can do. We have our bumps and bruises, but that's expected, But at the end of the day, it's like the mentality that we're going to do better, we'll be better, we'll continue to grow. And I just support those people to reach their goals. And I try and incentivize them to get encourage the behaviors that I want to see more of.
Yeah, that's amazing. Those were some great nuggets. I'm excited to clip that up. I think there were some gold nuggets in there. All right, so switching gears a little bit, I wanted to talk about the transition from, well, actually, let's go back even one step further. So you open your doors in Naples. Some people listening to this, they're going to be in different stages of their business. Some people will be doing millions of dollars every year. Some people will just be starting off. And I like to ask this question. So when you open those doors, how did you get your first patients, like your first 5 to 10 patients through the door? Where did they come from?
Yeah, I mean, it was rough. So first of all, I don't want to create, I'm building the business. Like, it's really, I think in life, it's like building a campfire or whatever. You start with a little bit of kindling. Some people start, they're given a lot of gifts. They're lucky. I was very lucky in many ways, but in terms of starting my business, I started from scratch. So if you're starting a business from scratch, it's time is a key component. It doesn't matter who the person is, because you just had a baby. It takes 9 months to have a baby. Okay. You can't speed it up. That's just a fact. You work hard, you're diligent, you're careful, you make good decisions. It doesn't matter. To grow the business is going to take a certain amount of time. Everyone's at a different place. In one environment, it might be faster than another. If it's wet outside, it's harder to start the fire. Eventually you'll get there. When I opened my business, it was straight tumbleweeds. It was brutal. I saved so much money from my other jobs to open this business. And I was in a very competitive place and I didn't really understand the business at all. Like I said, my attitude was, I could do this. I'm going to create an amazing experience for people. I'm going to take really good care of patients and they will come to me like Field of Dreams. That did not happen. And I get so upset because I'd hear about people, at social events. Oh, I go to this place. I go to that place. And it's like, but I'm going to give you so much better service and care about you. And I have better training or whatever it is, but you're going there. Like, I don't understand it. And it took a long time. But basically, there was no like single solution. I will say this, Google is very important, okay, which I didn't realize for probably at least a year. It was my wife who brought this to my attention, but she's like, when you search for Kirsch Derm, you're like, when you search for dermatologists in Naples or whatever, you're on like the 15th page. It's not very good, right? Because when people search, like that's intent to buy, right? So this, Ricky, like I'm sure there's many other segments you'll do, but if you're trying to coax somebody or pique their interest or whatever, that's fine. Facebook's good. But when people are like, I want a dermatologist or I want Botox or I want this or I want that, they go to Google and they type it in and then that's intent to buy. And if you got to show up on that first or second page or you don't exist. So I grew the business a lot organically. I went to other doctors' offices. I went to events. The return on investment was low, but I mean, it was really about getting those initial people on and then getting word of mouth. So that has its value and getting those
and low expense too. So like, I think that scratching and clawing for that first group of patients, kind of what you have to do.
You have to
most
do
of the
it,
time. Yeah.
definitely. I mean, but the effort is way more than the reward in those initial ones. You have to spend, it's a lot of effort and a lot of time and even money to bring those first people. And that's that's the start of your little snowball or your fire that you're going to build, right? And then ultimately, I did invest big money in Google and building my SEO, which has a long tail, but then, ultimately the ROI is very good. But if you want to get it going right away, you got to throw some money at it. And when you get on that first page, it makes a big difference, at least for general derm. It's a little bit different because it's
especially with ads, because that's your fast track right to the top with ads. Like with organic search.
Yeah.
Yeah. With Google ads, if you're managing it well, like you're only paying when somebody clicks your ad. Yeah. So it's pretty darn cost effective when it's managed appropriately. Like, and I think a lot of times, like, especially in the dermatology space, that's the first place to spend ad dollars. Cause like you said,
exactly,
it's direct response.
When I put myself higher on the list and I started paying for ads, I started getting a lot of patients. Then I started to get the reviews and then I was able to pull it down. But I think, even going back, and I made a lot of mistakes, but I think grinding it out to get things going is a good place to start. Once you feel like you've got good systems, and then if you get this, more patients, that you're really going to be able to take adequate care of them and they'll be very happy. And then you have a little bit of money that you can play with in the marketing. I would have held some back actually in hindsight because I put too much in my build out and other things. And I didn't really budget for how much I would need for marketing up front. And it is pretty heavy if you don't have that customer base to begin with. And then eventually, once you get that little bit to start and you got some traction and you feel good and you're ready, then you invest in the marketing and you start to really push and try to get your name in front of people.
Yeah. And for that snowball to work, everybody, reminder, it's obvious, but it's not going to work if you're not taking care of your patients. You're just always going to be scratching for the next person that comes for an appointment and then leaves and doesn't come back.
The worst thing that you can do is get people to come in and not have a good experience. That's literally the worst thing because, exactly like we've been talking about, it's all about reputation. So, you scale that up a little bit at a time as you know that you're able to deliver that very high level of service.
Yeah. In my interview with Terry Ross, we kind of talked about this. We were debating something else. But I think the key takeaway was like, hey, if you don't have that down, stop spending money on marketing for a minute. Go fix your business, fix the problems in your business, and then go back to marketing when you're confident that you have those systems in place to ensure quality experience, good patient care, and that people are going to leave really, really happy. So
What's
yeah,
interesting, sorry, I know you got a lot of things,
no, go
but
ahead.
people don't teach you in med school for sure about marketing and sales. You always have like this attitude, like, I hate to say it because it's not, first of all, it's not true. And it's also kind of rude to say, but it's like you look down a little bit more. You're like a doctor, you're a scientist, you're a provider, you do this, you do that. It's like sales almost feels like a little bit beneath you. But honestly, the whole game to life is sales, right? Like your reputation is effectively sales. How you present, how you get customers is sales. Like if you don't have sales down, you're not going to be successful. You can't have, it's like trying to watch TV, just the sound or just the pictures. You need both. So you can be the best provider in the best office, but if you don't have your marketing and your sales down, you're not going to be successful. And I didn't realize that up front, and I'm learning it now.
Yeah, it makes sense. Nobody knows about you. They don't even know you're not even in the consideration pool. Absolutely. This episode is brought to you by MedSpa Magic Marketing, my agency. We help med spas and aesthetics practices grow with more effective marketing strategies. And I know that's a vague phrase, right? It's a vague claim. So I have an offer for you. I offer this to any new prospects. If you're interested in exploring another marketing option, a new agency, or just getting into Facebook, Instagram, Google Ads for the first time, I'd love to show you why we're different, what we're doing for clients. And we can do that via a 1.5 hour planning session where I'll outline a specific marketing plan and I'll give you all of the blueprints that we would implement if we were to do business together. Now you can take that, use that on your own, hire someone else to help you execute it, or work with us. We really don't hold anything back on that strategy call. And I think you'll have a lot of confidence in how you manage your marketing investment moving forward, understanding some of the nuances that can help you implement more effective marketing strategies for your business. So if you want to do that, you can go to medspamagicmarketing.com. All right, so switching gears here from the transition from just dermatology, did you start, when you started the practice, were you doing cosmetic stuff too, or was that introduced later?
I always had some kind of bare bone scope of service when I opened. I was mostly focused on general derm. I had the injectables. I did not have any devices when I opened. I gradually added them to the practice over time. But my focus was general derm. And, that is an advantage that you have as a dermatologist because, of course, you can cross sell to your existing patient base, right? Like I have a certain volume of people. Once I got busy as a dermatologist, so a lot of this is applicable because I didn't have any business as a dermatologist. And Naples is very competitive when it comes to that. So that was tough. And so I understand, I can feel the pain of anybody in terms of building a business because it didn't come easy. It's not like in Toronto or whatever, when you're derm, you open your door and you're just going to be flooded with patients. But it is a nice thing to have where you essentially have this flow of people that are coming to your office every day that have potential interest in the products you're offering from a cosmetic perspective. So I built my general derm practice slowly and then began to add on the scope of service in cosmetics. And what I ended up finding was one that, I enjoyed that more ultimately. So that was good. And then two, it's definitely from a financial perspective, much more lucrative, which everybody understands as well, especially with like the decreasing reimbursements and all the challenges in the house of medicine.
Yeah. So as a dermatologist, it's basically a very obvious transition to branch off into these cosmetics because it's got obvious crossover. You're still dealing with, skin related stuff for the vast majority of it. And it's an obvious cross sell and an upsell. It's things your patients are interested in and it brings in more revenue for the practice. So you mentioned you did that slowly. Can you talk about that a little bit? So you didn't just decide you wanted to do cosmetics and buy like 7 new lasers that cost $400,000. It sounds like you kind of chipped away and started adding things incrementally. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So first of all, these devices, they can be wonderful. They can be very high margin, but they can be huge albatross too. And you have to be super careful. And the reps have no problem tying a rock to your leg and throwing you overboard, basically. And I hate to see that. And I won't say, luckily I've mostly avoided that myself, but I've felt it. And it's scary, honestly. So I do think, especially in the present environment where these interest rates are so high and there is a lot of competition in cosmetics, you have to be really careful before you move forward and probably consider a used device, honestly. But in terms of what I did to start, I just had the injectables, which is enough. Like the inventory is really expensive, honestly. Mm-hmm. Then I think my next move was like a micro needling pen, and then I did a hydrofacial, And then I did take the leap and I bought a Cyton BBL Halo, which is a wonderful device. That's an IPL and um, resurfacing laser. And then I got a radio frequency microneedling device. And that's pretty much. And then I've got the Moxie now. So I gradually added things to the practice.
Yeah, you didn't just decide I'm going to spend $2 million on equipment. You kind of gradually add, as you saw the cosmetic stuff taking off and you had people doing injectables, you're like, well, let's see what else we can add to this. And you added the next thing. And you're kind of ensuring that the business was healthy, it was profitable, it was doing well. And then you would figure out
Yeah,
ways
because
to
I
add
made a
on.
lot of big mistakes early. Okay, like I said, like right out of the gate, I spent too much money. I put all my eggs in this basket. I didn't have the customers. I didn't plan for the marketing. I already had too many sleepless nights where I was like, how am I going to pay my payroll? How am I going to pay my bills? And I don't
Yep.
want to go back there. Like I kind of learned that lesson, and I could have because it's very tempting, honestly, to go back there. But thankfully, I was able to restrain myself, and I basically said, "Listen, I'm gonna." This is a friend of mine who has a small business in town, a boxing gym, and he really has inspired me because he's always like focused on the bottom line, which wasn't my best attribute. And he's like, profits first. Profits first, Brandon. That's what he always tells me. Profits first. Like he started real small and he's adding little bits at a time and growing his business. Now he has 3 locations. I started going down. He had one tiny little one. And he always focused on the profits first. I said, boy, that's pretty smart. I wish I had done that to begin with, but now I know. So until I'm profitable, until I can see the path and I know that there's going to be like some cash burn when I add these devices and I can really map it out, and put things pen to paper. I had this like super strong aversion like to broccoli. Actually, I don't mind broccoli, but some other vegetable.
I hate
Yeah, I
broccoli.
didn't want to eat my vegetables. Like I never would want. I'm a hard worker. Like I'll work 12, 14,
Mm-hmm.
whatever hours a day, no problem. But when it came to like sitting down and opening an Excel spreadsheet and like even just trying to do basic math with numbers, it was crazy. Like it was kryptonite to me. Like I had no energy or motivation to do it. I don't know what the problem is, but then honestly is like once I sat down and did it, it wasn't that bad. And then I would kind of get more and more into it. And that's like critical. Like I can't believe that I opened my business without even looking at a single number before. It's ridiculous. But now, I'm gonna open up that spreadsheet before I make a move, and I'm gonna really try and be methodical about what are my costs going to be, and really think about them and then how am I going to make this profitable and what's the time frame and what's the cash burn. And you got to take that time and invest it. I highly recommend it. I didn't do it.
I can guarantee most people listening to this are in those they're maybe still in that exact same situation as they've, and it's boring. It's not fun. It's like, if you
Yeah.
think that I need more business, my business isn't doing as well as I like. I learned that, after really getting into the financials and talking about financial planning with clients and not just talking about marketing, is there are businesses that on the surface level, you're like, oh, they're making a lot of money. And then you realize, like, this has just been a common theme on the podcast is there's a lot of businesses that are doing good from the outside. They look like they're successful. They've got a big office. They're doing maybe at least $1 million plus in business, and the owner can't take home a paycheck, and they're struggling every month to pay their bills. And it's boring, and it's not sexy to sit down and do a spreadsheet. It's easier to go, well, I just need to market more. And oftentimes that's not true. And thinking in the terms of profit first,
Yeah.
how do I make sure that I've got more money coming in that's going out? Like, please take a minute, sit down and do that exercise. It'll put you in so much better of a position when you're planning your future and whatever it is that you're investing in. And when you start to add those devices or do things like that, you're doing it responsibly and not just, crossing your fingers and hoping for the best and letting a bunch of money flow out the door. Because the machine cost has been something that I've really been passionate about, because I've learned that that's one of the things financially that really handcuffs a lot of business owners is they've got all these machines that they were kind of sold a bill of goods. This thing's going to make you $1 bajillion. And then they really don't have a lot of demand for it, or a new machine comes out or it had its moment in the sun and it's not as popular now as it was a year ago. And they're sitting there with these expenses that they really can never seem to get above water on.
Those
So
things
I
will
think that's,
bury you. I mean, in medicine, talk about the therapeutic index of a treatment. It's basically like the safety profile, right? These devices, the more expensive, the more narrow that therapeutic index is, right? You got to be really careful because it's so easy. You can get drowned by it. And these guys promise you everything. Don't believe it. You got to look at the numbers and really negotiate and then consider a used device for sure. But it's funny, it's like the same thing that we were talking about marketing and reputation. It's if you don't have the numbers, it's the same problem. Like I don't remember the joke exactly, but guy's selling something and he's losing money every widget he sells, and he's like, "Well, I'll just sell more and make it up on volume." And that's like what ends up happening. It's like, I'm
Yeah.
not making any money selling my Botox or whatever. I'll just get more marketing and like sell more of it. But then it's like,
Mhm.
oh, then if you actually took the hour and a half and sat down and looked at like what it costs you in room time and this and that, and you add it all up, and then you see how much you're charging, and then you're like, oh, actually, I'm losing $30 every time I do a Botox procedure. Marketing and selling more of it is honestly only going to lead to a faster demise for me, which I say jokingly, but that happened to me many times. So it's like,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
because I didn't take the time and do that. So
Yeah,
I'm still not
absolutely.
the best at it, but at least like now I've learned enough lessons that I pay attention to it. I'll tell you the other thing. Actually, my friend Billy tells me with this boxing guy, which is smart. He's like, if you don't learn the lesson the first time it gets taught to you, the second time it's going to be even a rougher lesson, right? Like, so if you ignore that problem initially with the Botox,
Yeah.
and then you buy the laser, you're going to be in now that you've only compounded that problem because you never fixed it initially and you never took the time to
Hmm.
address it.
I'm curious when you did that. So you like so many people you were in that situation where you're like, oh crap, I didn't necessarily think about the financial planning as much as I should have coming out of the gate. Spent a lot of money on the build out. Um, and then you finally decided to sit down. What did that look like? Where you felt like you gained control and kind of turned things in your favor? Like what did that exercise look
It
like?
is really empowering. So that's a good turn of phrase, like gaining control or whatever, because then you feel like, oh, okay, now I know where I am, what I need to do, I can see a path to being more successful other than just kind of like feeling around in the dark. What it looked like, honestly, it just looked like brainstorming. It's even hard to know what all your expenses are because you don't necessarily track everything. Like the ultrasound jelly, like that actually does cost you money, right? So you need to
Hmm.
factor that in. Like how long you're in each room for. Actually, there's like you can calculate like based on the amount of rent that you're paying and the electricity and the internet or whatever. Like the amount of time that it takes to do a procedure is a factor. Like if this laser takes me a half an hour or 45 minutes does matter to my bottom line. So a lot of it is like taking some hours, not even all at once, because it kind of comes to you. You might be having a shower or being on a run or whatever. You're like, oh, that's an expense. And you kind of gradually fill in the blank and become more and more granular. And then you look at what your revenue is, and then you just start to see like, okay, what's the path here? What's the margin that I can expect to have? Where am I most profitable? And that's even a really important question to ask yourself because it's like, yes, I can do a lot of Botox and it's making me money. Okay, great, win-win. Pat myself on the back. But an hour of effort or whatever, growing this business or delivering these services yields me, you know, X dollars. But if I do the IPL, it yields me 2X. So understanding that and then be like, well, okay, well, in that case, like I need to be focused on the 2X until those things, there's always diminishing returns or whatever generally. So
Hmm.
until those things start to approximate, like I'm going to keep pushing on the higher margin service.
So when you did that exercise, were there specific changes or things that you identified that were like, oh my gosh, like so for example you just mentioned that you realize maybe that one service is much more profitable than another. Does that maybe impact, okay, well the change is when we do our patient consults, let's really start talking about all the things this device does for you. Like patients are really happy, it's getting us a 2x
Yeah.
return or 2x more revenue. So what is there anything substantial that stood out
Well,
for
I
you
mean,
when you
even
did that
first is how you
exercise?
incentivize the people who work for you, right? Because that's another thing. It's like if they're incentivized only effectively to sell injectables for whatever reason, because they get paid to do the injectables, but they don't operate the laser and they don't get paid to do it, then all of a sudden for me, because I'm the practice owner, right? When I sit down with a patient, I'm kind of unfettered in that anything that I offer this person, I'm going to get paid. So if I say to this person, you know what, you're not a good candidate for laser, just here's some sunscreen. Well, I always would do what's best for the patient. So that costs me a lot of money. But the same token, I sell the sunscreen, I still get paid, right? Plus the patient's happy with me, they refer their friend. If you're a provider in the office, then if you don't have the right incentive structure in place, then they're not going to have that same freedom to just really focus only on what's best for that patient, which ultimately is best for what's best for your practice. So it's not like a direct answer to your question because you were asking like how you change things for the margin, but
Or I guess just
I don't
when you
recommend
did
things
that
based on the
exercise.
margin is what I was going to say. Like I recommend.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, totally understand. But I just more meant when you did that exercise, was it just kind of figuring out, did you have certain takeaways where you're like, okay, these expenses are ridiculous. I need to cut back on
Yeah,
these things and we
absolutely.
need to double. So you kind of figured out where you need to start pushing the gas a little bit harder in terms of the revenue opportunities. And you started to gain some control over maybe, oh, wow, I didn't realize we were spending much money on this, that much money on this. This is a dumb expense. Let's cut that off the budget,
For
that
sure.
type
And
of
then you
stuff.
find that they're like, 1,000 cuts kills a person, right? It's the same thing in your business. Like I said, just mention that ultrasound, John. Like it's not a big deal or whatever, but it's like, okay, $3 every day, 30 days. I'm just saying as an example, if you were
Yeah. And you had 5 of those things, 10 of those
even
things.
$3 a day in your business, let's just assume for the ease of math, 20 days you're open. That's $60 a month. Then you multiply that by 12 months or whatever. That's $720 a year, right? Like it adds up so quickly, these little things. And then you can go back even to your vendors and be like, listen, like, I don't understand, I'm paying you the Galderma person this much. I'm paying the Juvederm person this much. Like, you need to make me understand why I should have to pay more for that or whatever. Even if it could be your Comcast cable bill. Because they'll just, if you don't stay on top of everybody, that's one thing I really learned. If you don't stay on top of it, nobody will really. I mean, you're the captain of the ship. Like, where the ship sails is all up to you. And you got to make sure everybody's doing their job and staying on top of the little details, or else they'll go unwatched. Anything that's unmeasured, becomes a problem.
Did you do that audit when you're like you said, like you're in the shower and you're like, crap, we spelled, because you said the jelly, for example, but you probably got 50 different versions of that
Yeah.
you said that's $720 a year you didn't account for, but there's maybe 20 or 30 different versions of that little expense. The pen refills, like all those types of
The
things. So,
hydrofacial, whatever, and how much solution they're using in the serums.
mm-hmm.
But you're asking this, you're making me uncomfortable. I'll tell you why. Which you're not like, I'm not really. I'm uncomfortable because I don't have good answers exactly, in the sense that this is not a one-time audit. This is like
Oh, it's
every
always, yeah.
day, all day, back of my mind consideration. It never ends. It just always continues.
Well, maybe that's the takeaway, though, is like, as a business owner, that's part of your responsibility. So that kind of needs to be at the forefront. You need to be having that on your radar every week.
Yeah.
You can't just ignore it and hope it goes away, especially if you're having financial issues with profitability. And I love that profit first. I've even heard agencies talk about that. There's some books on that topic of like, when money comes in, I've even heard people say that you should have separate accounts inside of your bank account. One of them is, so every $100 that comes in, a certain percentage of that $100 is going toward profit, $25 or $30 into the profit account, the operating expense account. So that's kind of interesting too, is making sure that you are thinking in terms of profitability first. And I think that's true because I talk to practice owners that are like there's just 2 people that work there. They've got a small little office and they're profitable. The owner takes home a nice paycheck and they love their lives, versus the practice owner that's got a staff of 15 or 20, but they can't even keep up with their bills and the owner doesn't take home a paycheck. So that profit first mentality is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Did you use a bookkeeper when you were trying to identify those expenses, or did you just do it manually?
No, I mean, I always had a bookkeeper, and I have a wonderful bookkeeper, actually. Okay. But the thing is, the bookkeeper is like the expenses, they're always in these huge buckets. They're not granular at all.
Yeah.
And it's not their fault. Like, that's not really their job. Like, unless you have a bookkeeper that works for you full time, I guess that would be a different situation. That's really like a controller, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you just have like a third party bookkeeper, I don't think that you can really rely on them to do those kinds of things. They just kind of do what you direct them and then help you a little bit, essentially preparing your taxes. But in terms of like the operating of your business and watching your margins and really keeping track of, because they'll, and I don't blame them, but I can't think of an example, but it's like they just kind of toss random things into different buckets. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, the government doesn't care if you categorize this as like, I mean, it does for some things, but a lot of things it doesn't matter. Like,
it's just an expense.
Exactly.
Yeah. I will say we did that. Like, we started, because we didn't have a bookkeeper for the longest time. We just had like FreshBooks, which is our like invoicing accounting software. And the expenses would just do whatever they were going to do. Like you said, they were all just bucketed in. And I think it's a good exercise, even if you have a bookkeeper, to go back and like maybe just pick like the last 90 days or the last 12 months, whatever that is, and go back and like give them some notes and try to break those categories down if they're able to do it. Because I think that's been really helpful for us, is like, I know my software expenses, payroll expenses, how much we pay on training and education. And so trying to figure out even a one-time audit to break those things out, it'll help you like identify those things that are sneaking through that you maybe don't realize you're spending a bunch of money on.
Doing the audit to get narrowing the buckets is really important, because when you have the bigger, wider ones, they don't really serve you very well. So every time I do one time do that, but then constantly try and refine and get more and more granular.
And I will say, Kelly Smith, we had her on the podcast. She wrote Top 10 Profit Killers for Aesthetics Businesses. and she's got a whole chapter on financial management, and she gives you, so if you're a practice owner and you just don't feel comfortable about any of these benchmarks, she gives you some benchmarks for like what percentage should be going to payroll, what percentages to operating expenses, what percentage should be profitability. So you have some framework for what your numbers should look like, because otherwise, if you don't have any sort of idea of what those things should look like, well, my payroll is 80% of my revenue. Is that good? Is that bad? My profit's 5%. Is that good? Is that bad?
I listened to that podcast. I found it very helpful.
Yeah.
She did, I think, under 30% for the payroll or whatever. But yeah, exactly. Having like benchmarks that you can compare for successful practice is really helpful.
Yeah, so you have some idea, because I know most people don't.
We went way off track here, though. From
no, that's good. I that's what we always do, though, because we go where the conversation leads. I want to get as many nuggets as we possibly can. I always learn a ton from these podcast interviews, which I like.
It's all about learning. It's a great community that you built. And
I'm
always like, listening to these podcasts, and I'm like, well, who's this guy? Does he really know what he's talking about? Like, listen, I'm just telling you from my experience. I learned a lot of lessons, and I'm kind of giving you my unfiltered opinion on my experience and what I learned. Am I the most successful guy? Not even remotely. But that doesn't mean that maybe you could learn something or not. I mean, if you think it's a bunch of nonsense, that's good too. But I feel like I want to be totally upfront and honest, right? Authentic with your view.
Yeah, I think this is so interesting, though, because I mentioned that our most popular episode last year was actually just interviewing other practice owners. So I want to do more of this, because I think you can learn so much from each other, and you don't get an opportunity to network or to get feedback from what other people are doing or what mistakes they've made and how they've course corrected, how they've improved profitability, how they think about financial management, patient retention. So I like this, talking to people that are in the weeds. I think it is really, really valuable. And like I said, you don't often have a lot of opportunities to network with other people that are in this same situation, same business as you. So I think all that stuff is super helpful. But yeah, I do have other questions on the patient retention stuff. So do you want to circle back to that to finish our interview for the next few minutes?
Yeah, whatever.
And you don't have to have perfect, clear answers on this. I'm just wanted to pick your brain a little bit on this. So you mentioned team retention was one of the things I wanted to talk about. Having a good reputation, like you said, attracts a team. Treating your team well, making sure they have incentives, that they're paid reasonably, like all of those things are going to allow you to have stickiness. And if you don't have practice or providers that are staying with you for a good duration, and that doesn't mean everybody's going to stay with you forever. Like you said, Dr. Kirsch, everybody's on their own path. You might just be a stopping point on their path. Treat them as well as you can on their journey and help them get to the next place. But having people that stick around is really important, especially in the med spa space, because people are not necessarily going to be loyal to the practice. They're going to be loyal to the person providing services. So if they're going for Botox injections and that person leaves every 2 months, it's going to create problems with retention, because they're kind of going back to the drawing board of figuring out who they want to go see again. They don't necessarily have the loyalty to the business. They have the loyalty to the person performing services. So that's really, really important. Treating them well, keeping those people around. Incentives. I highly recommend looking at our earlier episode with Mary Beth Hagan from Titan Aesthetic Recruiting. We touched on some of this in more detail. But in terms of patient experience, so I wanted to get into some specifics. So someone comes in the door, they're in your waiting room. We talked about it's important for everybody to put their hat on, like they're Dr. Kirsch, the person that answers the phone, the person that's at the front office. Can you talk about just how you've created a good patient experience from the moment someone walks in the door through the point that they leave, and what that generally looks like, or anything that you focus on with your team?
Yeah, well, right away, if you know me from how I operate in my clinic, it's like I don't like the waiting room. So right away, I'm watching who's in the waiting room, how long have they been here for, how quickly can we get them back? Like ideally, I don't want people in there at all, right? I want people right back into the room taken care of. So first touch point is generally on the phone or through email, right? Or a text message. We accept text. We use a text service so that people can text us. And all those touch points, I want to be, this is how I am anyway. So if you are interacting with Dr. Kirsch, as opposed to one of my proxy representatives, I try it, this, Ricky, we worked together for a while. Like I email you right back, right? Like I respond right back, and I take and I I review what I write, and I try and make it, I make mistakes or whatever, and I'm doing a lot of things, but I'll take the time to really consider what I'm writing and try and get back. I have a sense of urgency to everything I do. And so, and that's also like, if you're a busy person, you really have no other choice. So people need to be getting responded as soon as possible. Obviously I don't expect my staff to work after hours. I'm very happy that some of them kind of do that on their own, because they understand, like, they're so built into the culture of Kirsch Derm that, like, if they're not doing anything and they get a message on the weekend or whatever, they will respond, that just fills my heart with gladness, because it's like they have that urgency and they care so much that even though they're really not on the clock. Hopefully they are charging me, and I always tell them, like, if you're doing work, like, you should always be billing. Fine. But I'm just saying, like, they don't have to do that, and that they're doing that and they have that sense of urgency, and it really fills my heart with warmth. So a sense of urgency in everything we do, a sense of efficiency, a sense of really valuing the person's time, a sense of when someone calls, you're talking to them not like they're just like a number, but they're an individual person, a family member, a friend, your neighbor, someone that you're really excited to have. And like, I really think about it like this, I'm not a big Taylor Swift fan or whatever. I don't have anything against her. I think she's great. I don't really listen to that music, but I'm just saying, like, she's like one of the most famous people. That's why I'm using her as an example. Taylor Swift walks into my office. Does she sit in the waiting room for an hour? If Taylor Swift sends a text on a Saturday and says, hey, do you guys have an appointment? Do you think she waits till Tuesday to get responded to? You know what I mean? Once she gets back there, is the room clean and fresh and nice for Taylor Swift? Does everyone fawn over her and smile over her? And if she's a little cranky or whatever, does everyone just let it roll off their back? Right? And do they go out of their way? And then after she leaves, do they call her and say, how was it? Did we do everything that we could? Yes, they do. So if you aren't treating everybody like you would treat or expect your staff that they probably would treat without you having to tell them, like Taylor Swift, then you're kind of doing something wrong. Like that's, and I get it. Like probably, and be honest, if Taylor Swift walked to my office, she's going to end up with, unfortunately, and I don't want this, and it wouldn't be for me because I really try to do this for everybody, but she might get a little bit better service, but my goal, at least my objective, is that everyone gets treated like that pop star.
That's a really cool way to make all these dots connect as a practice owner, to just be thinking about if the person that, like, my most favorite athlete, favorite celebrity, favorite musician, they walked through the door and I was so excited they came and did business with me, how would I treat them from first interaction to follow-up? If you can use that simple trick to shape your mindset for how you interact with your patients, that's probably a game changer in and of itself, because there are so many details that fall from that simple mindset.
Exactly.
That's a really cool tip. I like that.
When you sit down and you're texting or emailing Taylor Swift, like, you don't just throw it out there, right? You're going to be like, this is text, like, really careful. Did I address her correctly? Is my grammar right? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. At the same time, you have this urgency, like, she wrote me, like, I got to get this right, but I also have to get it back to her. Like, that's the kind of mentality that I really want to foster.
Yeah, that's amazing. So red carpet treatment for every patient, and think about that'll shape the way that you do all those little things.
And the irony here also is that I feel it's more important to do it for ordinary people than it would be for Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift lives a very charmed, I don't know, maybe not, hopefully yes, it appears from what we see.
Yes.
Fairy tale life. I wish her the best. So it seems that way. You never really know. But the average person is a lot more probably aggravation and stress and whatever. And so wouldn't it be nice to do that extra bit and treat them even more special than the person who's already treated like unbelievably well? And then how does that make them feel? Like, how do they respond to someone doing something extraordinary? That's actually, someone taught me this. Dr. Burns, who's a really famous plastic surgeon, a super nice guy. He's like, he asks his staff like every day, did you do something like extraordinary? I can't remember his exact words, but it's like, what did you do that was like totally extraordinary for a patient that like is beyond what anyone would ever reasonably expect today? Like every day he wants his staff to ask themselves, like, at least one or two times today, you did something that was so above and beyond that like nobody would ever expect you to do that. That's what I want to do. And I want to do that for ordinary people like myself, like anybody else. And even people who are in worse shape than ordinary, like below average, like they got more hardship, lift them up, because that's why I even went into medicine. So really it does kind of loop everything together nicely.
Yeah, that really does. That's an awesome trick.
The whole point of doing this was to help the people who needed the help and to make them feel good about themselves. And when you're in cosmetic, I mean, it's really about making people feel good about themselves. This is an elective thing that they're trying to get, and they're doing it to make themselves feel better about themselves. So everything that you can do to make them feel good, whatever it is, you give them a cookie, whatever, okay? It doesn't matter. Then that is going to make you successful. I think if you make the people feel good about themselves, they'll feel good about you, and then you'll be successful. I mean, that was my game plan. And then you got to watch the numbers, because I missed that. So you could do all that.
Yeah.
And I'm growing the business, so we'll see where it ends up in 10 years. But that's
what. So that idea of like just the one specific detail there, which was patient wait times, and kind of having that goal that you get this little itch when you see people sitting in the waiting room.
Crazy. People don't.
And this is interesting, because as a medical practice, people have become. So this is where like med and spa, there's a very big disconnect in what people's interactions are with a medical practice typically and a spa.
Yeah.
A spa, you're expecting a luxury experience. You're not expecting to wait in a waiting room. You're expecting to be treated well. A medical office, I think people have this connotation of, I'm just a number. I'm going to sit in a waiting room for an hour and a half until the doctor's ready to see me. I have no idea when I'm going to get out of here. And when people are taking time out of their day, because most businesses as a medical practice or a med spa, you're open during normal office hours. So a lot of these people are taking time away from work, time away from kids. They're making time to go have these things done. And if you can get them in and out efficiently, you're going to create a better patient experience, just as one little data point. So how do you manage that? Do you have some sort of control over how your appointments are spaced or how long an appointment takes?
Yeah. And actually, Todd Miners, he's a dermatologist, a great guy, a mentor of mine. I worked for him briefly in Hollywood. He's like emphatic about this. I mean, he wants people waiting 0 minutes. And that's like, he's so proud of the number. Like he tracks it, and it's like his great pride, other than his family, I think, is like how few minutes people have to wait at Miners Dermatology. And that's the same thing. Like I want to schedule my appointment so that people aren't rushed out, so that they feel like all their questions are answered, their concerns. But then also to make sure, and then that people aren't waiting. So you can't make it into, if you want to make it into a factor. I don't know how successful you'll be, especially in a cosmetic business, right?
Yeah.
Like
so just proper spacing of your appointments.
Yeah,
account
proper
for the time.
spacing. And then you have anticipate like things. And you know what? The bottom line is, it doesn't matter. You do everything right. You space the appointments, you whatever, but then things happen. Someone's late, this, whatever. So I always make it right. I not always, because that's not probably accurate. But if I'm there and I have an opportunity, if someone waits, I don't like it. Like 20 minutes, like that's my cutoff. If you waited more than 20 minutes for anything, I'm very unhappy. Okay, so I'm going to try to do something to make it right for you, and that means give you an extra service, give you a product. I mean, definitely acknowledge that. I'll say something else also. One thing that I do here is a little tip of pearl. I give these away. Like, even if someone waits 5 minutes, personally, I say, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. The expectation is like, you should really expect to wait 20 minutes to see your doctor, blah, blah, blah. Like if you get in less than 20 minutes, you should be happy. If you waited even 5 minutes, I'm like, I'm sorry, because I don't want you to wait even 5 minutes. I want your appointment to be at 10. And then, maybe it's not me because there's like a process, but you're seen at 10 because that's your appointment. And then I come in like a choreographed dance, the person that does whatever needs to be done, does their thing. Then I come in, you don't wait. Yeah. And if you do wait, even if it's in a reasonable amount of time, I still apologize because that's not my goal. I'm falling below my own expectation, and I really value your time. And I want you to know that even though it was still good performance, it wasn't my best. And I'm going to keep looking toward my best for you.
Yeah, sometimes just acknowledging it and setting that high standard, I think, shows patience.
If Taylor Swift waited 5 minutes, you would apologize.
Yeah, so your appointment's 11, it's 11:05. You're definitely saying something.
Sorry, Mrs. Swift. I apologize.
Yeah. I have a couple more for you. Do you have a couple more minutes?
Yeah,
a couple of other things I wanted to get to.
Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to talk about real quick a patient consult. So like with medical aesthetics, and this has kind of been a topic that we've been thinking about a lot from a marketing standpoint, is when we're marketing, a lot of times we're promoting services that people have some awareness of, right? So let's say it's Botox. People know kind of generally what Botox does. So we'll run ads and offers to get people in the door for a Botox appointment. But on the flip side of that, as an aesthetics business, you really want to put the consult first and talk to the patient about what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish, and what options they have available to reach their goal. Do you have any advice on the patient consult, especially when someone comes in just kind of they say they want a specific service? Do you all still talk to them about other things and other options related to the outcome? Or do you just say, hey, you wanted the Botox, we'll give you the Botox, and then talk about that after? How does that work?
I guess it really depends on the individual. You want to be careful because someone comes in for Botox and then they got jowls or whatever. You don't want to say, oh, I noticed your jowls, miss. Miss Smith, I noticed that you got this big dark spot on your cheek and it looks really weird. Did you want me to take care of that too? Right?
Yes,
like you just coax a little bit to see what their interest level is. When someone makes an appointment for a specific service, we deliver that service. We have different things in our appointment. We have consultations. That's just like a separate appointment. Come in for a consultation. In my own approach is I'll come in, I'll walk in, I'll talk to the person. I try and connect with them on an individual basis. I deliver the service and I just try and kind of feel them out. Like, do I think that they're interested? A lot of times when they get comfortable and they're sitting there in the chair with you, be like, I was just wondering, like, do you mind? Because they're almost feel uncomfortable asking you because they have an appointment scheduled for this specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be mindful of that too. They might want to talk to you about something, but then they're afraid that they've only been allocated this much time. So they might, usually they'll say, if they are interested, well, I'm also bothered by these wrinkles or whatever. Sometimes it's like, you just kind of have to feel it out. I mean, that's like some of the interpersonal skill set that is important to this job. You have to have that. You see the person, you kind of get an idea of what interests them or what they like. You can just kind of gauge them a little bit. And then it's like, maybe you just ask them, like, have you ever had an IPL before? Yeah. I love IPL. It's, very little downtime. It's not too expensive. And then the results generally are really good. So if someone's got like a lot of age spots, I'm like, listen, I'm doing your Botox. I'm so happy. I hope you like it. But have you, and I talk to them, I kind of feel them out, like, we also have this device if you're interested, because I notice you have a little bit of brown spots. And I'll tell you.
So kind of mentioning the solution and saying, hey, just so you know, like, I know you came in for this. We also have some of these other things available. Instead of going to the issue first, you're kind of going to this. We also have this other thing, and then
we have something that's really good on that. And I'll tell you, even just like from my own perspective, the tone and texture and color of your skin, is important to the appearance of your overall appearance as much or more than even the wrinkles. Like, it's the first thing you see. My own flush is kind of like camouflage. People camouflage on a car, like when they test it out on the roads, because you can't really tell the lines or whatever, right? Like specifically, you'll see these camouflage BMW that they're testing or whatever, driving around town. They put a weird paint job on it, so you can't see the lines. You can't really appreciate it. It's the same thing like on the face. Just that's my perspective, is like treating the wrinkles. If you got a lot of brown spots and your skin doesn't look right, it's not gonna have the impact. So actually, the way I kind of look at it is like, look, you're coming to me for my professional advice. You want to look a little bit younger, a little bit more vibrant. You're spending this much money already. How can I get you the best result, make you the happiest? And here's my opinion. Like, if you just want the Botox, then that's perfect. We'll do that. Maybe you don't want the Botox. Maybe you want to focus on this first, or maybe you want both. Yeah, I try and give these solutions.
So having good feelers for just when to poke and prod and how to guide the conversation is really important. Like, that's kind of a skill in and of itself. So I know this is a challenge for practice owners that I've talked about, and this will be my last question, is as the practitioner, you've got confidence that you've got that ability to really feel out the situation and know what is appropriate and when it's appropriate. How do you standardize that to other providers so that you've got a consistent form of delivery for like the consult or the patient communication? Or is that I know most people that I've talked to say that it's kind of a challenge that they're working through.
Yeah, that's a good question. I hate to say this, but some of it is like, do you got it or you don't? You know what I mean? Like, people. No, you have to know. You have to know yourself. Some people are people, right? Some people aren't. If you're a people person, then that's probably a good job for you. If you're not a people person, maybe you're more of like a person who needs to be a little bit more behind the scenes. Like, you're not going to be as successful. You can always develop your skills, and I'm better today than I was yesterday, and hopefully I'll be better tomorrow. But there's a certain amount of emotional intelligence. There's a certain amount of you got to get energy from helping people and talking to them. If you don't get energy from helping people and talking to them, then you probably don't understand them that well, and it might not be like the best fit for you. It's like, a fish got to swim, a bird's got to fly. Like, if you're a people person and you can understand and read people, then that's good. You can always work on it, but I think the first thing is really identifying, like, are you a fish or are you?
Yeah, you could be the best provider. You could be a really good injector, really talented with your implementation and the way that you do things. But if you don't have people skills in this business, you're probably not going to succeed because it is so relationship based. Just like most things.
You can have
hiring right.
That's like a tool in your business that you would use. That person who's like just an amazing injector, no interpersonal skills, but you need to pair that person with
some supplemental people.
Dinner, you got to have your starch and your meat or whatever. So then you got to have someone who's super personal, who's like, listen, they're the one that's going to talk to the person and feel them out. Then once they have the plan, they're going to hand them over, like, okay, now you're going to see Dr. So-and-so. Dr. So-and-so, just so you know, he's really good at this. Yeah. You can even make a joke about it. Like, he might not be the warmest, fuzziest guy.
Yeah.
He is unbelievable at injections. You're going to be so happy. And I'll tell him what we talked about, and he'll take care of it for you.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. That's a good tidbit too. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our time today. We might have to do this again because I really appreciate the conversation. I even had some other questions. So, but I think we had lots of good nuggets. I'm always thinking, because we do the social shorts, I'm like, I have so many good clips from this episode. So I'm excited to share it. Thank you so much for sharing your insights today, Dr.
That's
Kirsch.
very kind. I always appreciate your time too, Ricky. Thanks for everything you do. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This podcast is a production of MedSpa Magic Marketing. If your med spa or aesthetic practice is in need of digital marketing services, help with advertising on Facebook, Instagram, Google, lead generation, and booking more appointments, please visit medspamagicmarketing.com.